To me, the role of a board should be a sounding board to founders. It's very hard for us to assume that founders know everything, which is why the company's board of directors should be a voice of reason in everything that happens. And the board isn't just made up by a single person, basically various people with different line of thoughts. So why has nobody bring this up at all? I have no idea. In fact, that is what every investor that I've spoken to for the story question this.
Welcome to Analyse Asia, the premier podcast dedicated to dissect the pulse of business, technology, and media in Asia. I'm Bernard Leong, and high-profile startups can rise and fall given the macroeconomic climate or unforeseen circumstances such as a global pandemic that disrupts the supply chain. Today, I have Lum Ka Kay, Deputy Editor of the Can Southeast Asia, to discuss the rise and fall of Zilingo, B2B near startup unicorn, and examine the fallout and potential endgame after the board booted out Ankiti Bose, their former CEO and co-founder, based on allegations of insubordination and suspected financial irregularities a few weeks back. And this is a big story happening, percolating across Southeast Asia. Ka Kay, welcome to the show.
Hi Bernard, thanks for having me.
Being our first time guest, I always like to talk about origin stories. So how did you start your career?
Well, actually, it's a fairly straightforward one because I'm a journalism graduate. So after that, I have been in the industry since right after I graduated. So my first job was with also a regional-based tech media publication called Digital News Asia. So it was when I started to cover a lot more on business and also startups and venture capital. So after that, I moved on to the Age property to cover a little bit more about property side, print and online media. So it was an interesting learning curve for me. And after that, I moved on to Deal Street Asia, which is currently owned by Nikkei. So from there, I go deeper into venture capital and private equity, basically private capital investments, right? And in 2019, John Russell, a friend and also a mentor, he was tapped to help set up the Southeast Asia edition for the Can, right? And yeah, we all got together and say, let's do this. Let's bring in-depth reporting to Southeast Asia.
And our good friend John is now a partner in Crypto.com Venture Capital, has moved on to the other side. But
yes.
Curious to ask, since now you're the deputy editor for the Can Southeast Asia, what is your current role and coverage, and what are the topics typically you cover in the region? I know venture capital is one area that you cover.
Private capital is obviously something that I'm always interested in. But being a Malaysian and based here in Kuala Lumpur, I'm also very interested in whatever that's happening in the business landscape of Malaysia. So particularly like funding agencies, of course, any government projects, and also whatever that's happening in the startup ecosystem. Recent stories include digital banking and the Malaysian Fund of Funds program, Penjana Capital. But because I'm also familiar with the region, right? So I cover quite a bit of Singapore companies as well. Obviously, most recently is Zilingo.
I was going through your portfolio of articles in the Can, and I'm also a subscriber there. I know you cover a lot on specs and also on maybe sometimes the companies that are doing regional expansion. I think the most interesting one was Custom. I think at one point you did an interview on that. I guess being a journalist, and you probably have heard millions of startup stories from startup leaders or even from the buy side, the venture capitalists. What are the career lessons you can actually share with my audience?
I think I've always appreciated when people are being authentic. That is something I always remind myself to do as well, no matter at what stage of my career. And because I notice, like, as you speak with founders, VCs, investors, people from various industries, sometimes you sort of observe that some of these people lose their authenticity as they move up their career and things like that. So I find that is a little bit, how do I say it? A little bit difficult for me to make peace with. So I hope wherever you are, you can always maintain being authentic to yourself and also to people around you, right?
That's a great career lesson, I guess, being authentic, whether in the times where you're a poor entrepreneur to where you became someone major, a titan in the industry. I think it speaks for a lot of people. So this comes to the main subject of the day because I got you here to talk about what happened to a company called Zilingo and maybe the potential scenarios that may lead to its end or maybe resuscitated again. And I think it's based on an article that you have written called Zilingo's Fight to Survive with or without the CEO Ankiti Bose, which was published in the Can, and I have a reference there. But maybe just for me, I will drop a quick introduction. Zilingo is a B2B fashion commerce startup founded by Ankiti Bose and Durov Kapoor, and it's being backed by Sequoia Temasek. But maybe I want to start from the chronology right from the beginning. Who are they and what is the company about in a little bit more detail and how do they operate?
Yeah, for sure. So Zilingo is headquartered in Singapore, but it was Ankiti's idea, right? Back in I think about 7 or 8 years ago. So this is a story that have told probably quite many times by her, where she was traveling to Bangkok and she was at the Chatuchak market where you have like so many vendors, retailers, fashion retailers there, right? There was just selling you all sort of things. And yeah, the idea occurred to her that how can I digitize this process, right? So that's how the idea for Zilingo came about. If I recall correctly, Juve is a friend, and so they wanted to do this together. At that time, she was still an analyst at Sequoia, and she also had a stint at McKinsey and Co. before that. So probably this part is a little bit murky, but it could be they incubated the idea within Sequoia, and then they launched it, right? So Sequoia obviously also support them in their seed round, being one of their earliest investors. So I think at the beginning the product was mostly B2C. So it was consumer facing, where they sort of, it's a marketplace. It's like something like your Pomelo, your Love Bonito kind of thing that focus on fashion. But over some time, they realized the bulk of the margin is actually in the B2B side. So that's when they pivot and sort of do a wholesaler marketplace thing. And also over the course of years, they then expanded into other verticals like financing and then apparel sourcing, and then the most latest ones is the SaaS platform, where they sort of provide software for factories to digitize their production, to monitor all those activities. Yeah, that in a nutshell is what Zilingo does.
And kept within the supply chain itself as a B2B marketplace. I think the origins question not explored by other outlets as well. I think during this course, whether you read Bloomberg or you read Morning Context as well, they talk about that other than the origin story told by Ankiti Bose, there's also the other origin story that it was an idea that was discussed between Ankiti Bose and her mentor, Shai, which a lot of people know is the general partner for Sequoia India, and also they are the people fronting Sequoia Southeast Asia. So this is the story that we're going to be talking a lot about as we move along this conversation. So how does the business actually work for Zilingo with merchants on their platform? So say if I'm a apparel maker, how do I get onto the platform, and how does the business work for me, and what does Zilingo gain out of the transaction? Maybe the question is really geared towards thinking about the business model.
This is also something that I have tried to understand for a very long time, right? Because I think it wasn't explicitly explained before. So, which was why in this story, I was also dying to sort of understand what is this B2B thing about. If I understand correctly, and a huge thanks to my sources for helping me to understand the business as well, is that you know how in the fashion industry there's the factories that produce the clothes, right? And then there is the retailer, and then in between there's a middleman called sourcing companies, right? So it's a very traditional space. What sourcing companies do is that they would actually go around the world, or maybe they have a certain geography. It's a very traditional business, right? They do trips, they visit these factories, try to understand what is it that they want. That process is essentially what Zilingo is trying to digitize. Think of it as, I'm not sure if you have heard of this company, a supply chain company, but it's called Li and Feng. It's Yeah,
Yes,
so
it's a very well-known logistics company from Hong Kong, but it's quite global.
yeah. So they're a
Yeah.
supply chain company. So they're essentially Zilingo is essentially trying to be the digital version of Li and Feng. But as pointed out by one of my sources in the story, is that yes, there is no doubt that something has to change for this apparel sourcing business, but are the people ready for it? Because what are you going to do if factories and retailers are not going to adopt your digital solution? How do you get past that adoption phase? That's one part of the business, and the other part is fairly straightforward, right? It's a B2B wholesale marketplace. So merchants or wholesalers go on there to display their products, and then you have retailers that are trying to go there and source for buy products in bulk. So that's the other business. So enterprise is the apparel sourcing business. So then there is a SaaS platform. So SaaS platform is that they're trying to offer this software to factories, which help them to track, digitize, monitor all their manufacturing assembly lines, right? So it's all real time generating data kind of thing. So it seems that is the part that is doing very well for them at the moment, because I managed to interview Ankiti, and according to her, it's a very high margin business, right? Of around 70 to 80% gross margin. So if they can expand that part of the business, there is a chance for the business to turn a profit in the long run.
It's interesting because when we think about Zilingo started off as a B2C company, there's another company that I thought they were relatively close with, even though they're doing the part of the supply chain similar to Li and Feng. That's Shein in China. But whereas in the Chinese ecosystem, they already locked up the production, the factories, and the minimum quantity order. So the supply chain is much more vertically integrated. Whereas if you look at Zilingo, it's a little bit more what I called partner, or maybe handling the apparel makers as part of their supply chain. And that lies the major difference. And the fact that they didn't go B2C with that capability actually surprises me at the start.
I guess because the margins are not very high, right, for B2C, and also it was getting very competitive at that time. It was starting to get quite hot already, right, in terms of B2C, because if I recall correctly, all this Pomelo and the likes all started at about the same time. And then obviously we also have Zalora, right? Kind of saturated already. So I think it's a good thing that they have pivoted into B2B.
One more thing to just add, because being in the logistics space previously, actually sending apparel through logistics is extremely cheap because you can actually use postage to do it, unlike the other products. So you are literally using like a 30-cent stamp to send apparels across the thing. So in terms of the supply chain, actually where the real key is the sourcing, is the making of the apparel. If you can actually control that cost, your margins are extremely high on that. But maybe coming to the more interesting part, and I like the way how you are presented in that article of yours, is who are the key investors behind Zilingo, and what does their current market capitalization table, or what we call cap table, look like?
So obviously, Sequoia is currently their biggest shareholder, right? Because Sequoia Capital India has followed on every round, or at least almost every single round. And they have also brought in Temasek in one of the later rounds, and Burda is also a significant shareholder. And then you have Coral Partners too. So the rest of but there are also quite a number of super early investors, like Wavemaker too Wavemaker Partners is also an investor in them. Although I think their stake is much smaller, probably in the single digit percentage, right? But yeah, Sequoia, Temasek, Burda, Koru, and Sofina, these are all like rather significant shareholders. But the board currently only consists of Sequoia, Burda, and Koru Partners, as well as the two co-founders, Ankiti and Dhruv.
And Temasek as well, right? There was a board member that was there and then resigned.
Yeah, so currently, as of now, Temasek isn't on the board.
I am very curious, how did they ended up being valued at USD 970 million in their last round of finance. That's why I call them a near startup unicorn. They are not really a startup unicorn.
Well, this question, I'm also dying to find out that I know as much as you do, right? Because this is definitely something that it's very hard to understand sometimes, how do investors value this kind of things, because sometimes we think that a company shouldn't be valued at this price, but they are, right? so yeah, I know as much as you do on for this, right? So which is why when I spoke to several investors who are not shareholders in the company, they did say it was when they come across the company during the pitching stage, they couldn't really reconcile with the fact that where the valuation is versus what the business is. Right. So that viewpoint is not shared by just a single investor. I've spoken to at least four or five for the story itself. And they too share the same sentiment.
And because they pivot from B2C to B2B, so you can do things like gross merchandise value, which is the GMV value for the merchandise as well. So it's very hard to value as well, right? Because I mean, even if they do the supply chain, you have to value as a SaaS company. Then the question is, how much are you paying for the SaaS service on recurring value as well? I mean, those data were hard to get. Even for me, when I was researching on this story, I also think a lot like, how do you get to this kind of valuation where a lot of it seems very opaque from the very get-go?
You're right. Yeah, so investors, they don't also really understand what the fundamental or what the core business is. So yeah, it's like a few factors at play here, right? But mainly, I think it's because too expensive lah.
Or everybody's FOMOing, fear of missing out, and then ended up because one person said this is the number that everybody had no choice to follow. But I mean, that is when we were in a capital up market, not now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to get down to the events that happened recently. So can you talk a little bit about the chronology on how Ankiti Bose, the former CEO and co-founder of the company, was suspended, I think, on 12th of April, and then subsequently fired on 20th of May 2022?
Yeah, I think she was suspended much earlier, right? She was suspended in at the end of March, if I recall correctly. So it was only at April 12th that the story broke, right, by Bloomberg. So I think it was very hard to sort of pinpoint what exactly happened. But after that story broke, obviously there was a lot of attention on the company, what has happened, or rather what kind of investigations that were being launched on Ankiti. So there was a lot of speculations, obviously, but I think the most glaring thing was after Ankiti was suspended, there was a leadership vacuum in the company because there was no acting CEO appointed. Yeah, 5 to 6 weeks, there was just no CEO, right? And hence, employees obviously are starting to explore options of leaving the company. And in just that 6 weeks, right, there's like so many stuff that came up. Like it's even very hard for me to also follow on what happened. But I think the key events were like Ankiti was suspended, and then very quickly Shailendra from Sequoia Capital India has stepped down from his position at Zilingo's board, and he was replaced by the fund's director and head of portfolio finance, Sandeep. And after that, very shortly, one of the key member of Zilingo, who is the public relations and comms director, was also suspended. And according to her LinkedIn post, she said that she was suspended because she was questioning the board about why was Ankiti suspended but didn't get a reply. So there was something happening in between, and then she was suspended. And then after 2 weeks later, or about 10 days later, you have news that holders have recalled their 40 million loan to the company. And Zilingo said that, the debtors accelerating their repayment. So they have appointed a financial advisor for that process. And Ankiti then was reportedly offered to repay all of Zilingo's loan, that 40 million. And just a few days after, you have more news on the company's leadership, which is the CFO, Ramesh, has left. and he has only just joined the company in March and was supposedly poised to take over the CEO role, right? As soon as Ankiti has exited the company. And yeah, at the same time, you have the board who has fired Ankiti. So that, in a nutshell, is what happened.
I want to double click a little bit, but I want to see it from all the different perspectives. What will be the perspectives to the event from Ankiti Bose and her co-founder Dhruv, correct? Where are they? Where are the board of directors and the customers and partners? You talk about the loan repayment that's brought up. That has obviously some impact to the company, the financials of the company, and what happened to his employees as well, given so many turnover happened during this period. So can you tease out a little bit like these few different stakeholders, what they want? I think maybe I will start off from the board of directors because there's a lot of discussion about acquisitions. Zilingo being acquired by another Indian company, and suspected people was a company called Muglix. And then there was also rumors of the former CEO of Myntra that was actually acquired by Flipkart to take over Zilingo from Ankiti. So maybe we can tease that out first from the board of directors and then we move down the list.
Yeah, sure. I think for the board of directors, it's kind of hard to determine what exactly went down, right, between the board and Ankiti. But perhaps what I could say is that I'm pretty sure they are working out a plan, right, what to do with the company. But as of now, it's very difficult to say what exactly that they have in mind because they haven't really come out to address whatever that were being brought up, right, in terms of the allegations, in terms of the investigations that were launched on the former CEO of the company. So if they could clarify this, then maybe we all can have a better view on where things stand as of now. Because I did manage to interview Ankiti for the story, and she too is questioning. I have no idea what are the results of the investigation, right? Like, my shareholders haven't gotten in touch with me for any dialogue about the future of the company or what has happened so far. No word at all. And obviously, she also did mention that this is what has played out in the public is less than 10% of what actually happened. So at this point, it's very, very hard to go into details of what happened.
So the key part which I didn't get are the allegations to the CEO true from the reporting that includes subordination and financial irregularities. Ankiti Bose have gone to Straits Times, which is the largest media outlet in Singapore, and claimed that in the video that she did not see a final report that led her being suspended and fired. I guess because you have interviewed her, how viable is her defense and what does it mean for the company going without her? I understand her co-founder is still on the Zilingo board and is still acting as in his role as the CTO of the company, right?
Yeah. She has said the same thing to me. She has said the same thing to Bloomberg as well, right? And until the board can display evidence to show that she has conducted all these things that she has allegedly done, then I say it would be very difficult to say that she's in the wrong here, right? Because I believe that up until now, it seems like it's a one-sided conversation to me. So why don't the board come out and clarify some of these things, clear the air a little bit, right? Instead of just leaving everything on everyone in the dark. So as for the company, I imagine the morale would be super low right now within the company because you just don't have anyone who knows what's going to happen to the company, right? So obviously, the easiest thing to do is just seek another opportunity and leave, because there's just so much uncertainties. Salaries were delayed. When I was writing the story, one of the former employees told me that their salaries for April were only paid in late May. So for existing current employees, will their salary for May be paid on time, or will it be delayed again? To some of these employees, like it's people's livelihood. Obviously, when they think that they can't continue in this kind of environment, they obviously are gonna leave.
So Personalities aside, there is a silver lining from the whole debacle, centered on an acquisition that Zilingo made in a Sri Lanka company called Anzinga. And what does this company do, and how can their capabilities revive the fortunes of Zilingo? So one interesting data point and part I should add is that a lot of the large apparel makers, for example, H&M, they do a lot of their apparel manufacturing actually in Sri Lanka and Pakistan. So this is a pretty interesting point to sort of point out that that's the reason why the Sri Lankan company is of interest.
I mean, it was a very small scale startup when it was acquired by Zilingo in late 2019. They bought the company for 15.5 million in stock and cash. So what the company does essentially, it's a software company that has a manufacturing execution system, which is basically what Zilingo SaaS business is right now, right? Which allow apparel manufacturing factories to track, optimize, digitize their manufacturing processes with real-time visibility so that you can estimate and reduce wastage, right, in the entire manufacturing process. So everything is much more supposedly to be much more efficient, and it could improve the overall quality of whatever that the factory produced. So it was, from what I understand, it was near profitable when it was acquired. Yeah, and it seems that it now has become a very important core business of Zilingo right now, which is under the vertical called Z Factory. So this was what that they are selling to the factories right now. So it's priced according to each assembly line. So this was what Kitty explained to me, right, in my interview with her, where she said Zilingo charged this on a per assembly line basis per month. So the contracts can be like 1 to 3 years long, right? So in this sense, it gives the company a very steady and recurring revenue. And on top of that, as a SaaS tool, it has a very high gross margin. She said actually she see this business can contribute a lot to the company's future, and this will be a very useful asset if the company, if Zilingo is sold to another party.
So my question now then is, what's the end game for Zilingo as a company now? Given the debtors are recalling the loan, and then what will happen to these assets like Anzinga? Are there any options for the company other than shutting down or being acquired? I know Ankiti Bose is trying to buy the company from her side, getting funds from other private equity funds. So what is the likely end state here?
I think as of now, it's very hard to say, but one investment executive did break it down to me, like it probably, if the debt holders want to do it this way, it could be a hostile takeover. So they could sort of convert their debt into shares, and then they sell it to either distressed asset fund or a special situations group. And yeah, and obviously the valuation will be pared down significantly, but that's how the company would get to survive instead of being straight up closed down. So yeah, I mean, I would be curious to see what the board decides at the end of the day. But I think if it's salvageable, then I don't see any reason for them to close that down, right? But then again, I'm not sitting on the board. So yeah, this is just purely from my perspective.
Yeah, I wonder what are the discussions currently sitting on the board. Everyone wants to be a fly on the wall. So given that corporate governance have been the center of this conversation, I think one thing that it never explained to me from all the different media outlets is, why hasn't the board taken actions since the company has stopped submitting financials since 2019?
Well, this your guess is as good as mine. To me, the role of a board should be a sounding board to founders. It's very hard for us to assume that founders know everything, which is why the company's board of directors should be a voice of reason in everything that happens. And the board isn't just made up by a single person, basically various people with different line of thoughts. So why has nobody bring this up at all? I have no idea. In fact, that is what every investor that I've spoken to for the story questioned this. They were like, how can you have marquee investors like Sequoia Capital, Temasek, Berda, how can they accept the fact that Zilingo hasn't filed its financials? And what was the reason given by the founder? And if they were okay with it, so why bring it up? Why make this an issue now?
So this comes to my next question then. A common thread that seems to be a media narrative from India to Southeast Asia from other outlets, for example, Morning Context. And I think, and it's also, but it's not promoted by the council because I have to be pretty fair about this, right? Is that Sequoia Capital is leveraging corporate governance as a weapon to oust founders from their companies. For example, Ashton Grover from Parapet, a P2P lending company in India. Now, I don't have a position on this. To be fair to Sequoia Capital, the VC has a stellar reputation. It's probably one of the top, or if not the top VC firm in the world, because they have a lot of famous companies from Apple, Google, Stripe, many top startup companies under their belt. So I guess my question is, to more establish, what are the facts on the ground? And do you see this narrative hold any water in the conversation specifically for Southeast Asia and Indian market? I mean, I talk to the people on the ground. There are some entrepreneurs they are very afraid to go to Sequoia Capital to raise capital because of what they have been seeing on all these events playing out in the open at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, right? Sequoia Capital is a global brand. But also when it goes to local and regional chapters, they are run quite differently. So when you talk about how Sequoia Capital it has a stellar reputation, I would think of Sequoia Capital US, right? Not necessarily the Southeast Asia or India side of things. So that's one. The other is that the claim that Sequoia Capital India has leveraged corporate governance as a weapon to oust founder. I mean, I think it's a case by case thing. I wouldn't dismiss the fact that is it a pure coincidence that these companies that having corporate governance issues all happen to be portfolio companies of Sequoia Capital India? Maybe not a coincidence, right? I don't know. But you brought up Bharat Pay, right? So specifically to that company, based on the news report that I have read so far, I mean, there were evidence that there are wrongdoings by the founders, right? Which was why he resigned himself instead of, being pushed out by the board. So, but when you sort of put two and two together, and why is there like recently, why all these companies that are in trouble happen to be Sequoia Capital India's company, it's like, who's at fault here? Is it both? Is it single party? I wouldn't say it's a single party fault, right? I mean, the board and the founder are involved in every decision making. I'm not saying day to day, right? But strategic decision making, and also there's check and balance in terms of financials, numbers, and all that, right? So yeah, maybe investors can always go back and say, we only know as much as what we were told by the founders. But I would argue it in a way that as investors, you have the right to ask for more. You can push back. Why didn't you?
I think this is probably going to be a story that we will both continue to monitor. And I think it's pretty interesting that how even very good startups can rise and fall very quickly. So just before we end, I thought I wanted to ask you, since I have you on the show, I understand you cover SPACs and VC remote deal making in Southeast Asia in some of your articles. I think one question I wanted to get is, what are your thoughts now on the current funding climate due to the recent economic downturn that is sprang off by things like inflation, the Ukraine war, and also global supply chain issues that's coming?
Yeah, I think so. Specs have obviously slowed down a lot, right? Like a lot. I think almost to a halt. So I think it's a very difficult climate for anyone who wants to go public simply because the sentiments are very bad. Even if you are a solid business, good company, you would have to discount. You would have to give a big discount because sentiments are just very bad right now. in terms of deal making, I think VCs are still making deals though, but probably they would focus a lot more on founders' plan to turn a profit path to profitability, and also maybe more scrutiny on more attention on product market fit instead of just, oh, I actually really like this founder, they're awesome. They don't have a product market fit, but it's okay, I'll still fund them kind of thing. Maybe less of that, I imagine. What are your thoughts?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm still looking for deals, but I think currently what I've seen is that at least in the Web3 where I actually do most of my angel investing in, is that I think a lot of Web3 companies are having challenges. You can no longer raise just with a white paper and an idea and get the kind of valuations that is way overboard because of the current climate, and also because of the crypto market tanking at the same time, right? But I think the good companies will still stay. They will always be there. So it's just a question that now is good for me because there's less noise and more signal. This is pretty much where I think things are going to go. But I think one thing is for sure, but for new startups that are coming in, they have to try to figure out whether they can stay alive in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For startups that has raised significant money but still haven't had product market fit, it will be a very difficult period for them because they just can't burn money anymore, right? It's hard to say how many companies will fall during this period, but you will definitely see quite a number of companies struggle.
So maybe my final question is, will we see a lot of startups going underwater in the next few months?
In the region, I think maybe not. But what we are already seeing is there's a lot of layoffs, right? Basically to reduce cash burn. So right now, what we'll have to see is whether if this move will work, and if it doesn't, then it will be companies closing down, and we hope that it doesn't get to that lah.
So, Ka Kay, many thanks for coming on the show, and definitely I'll get you back in another time when you have a great story. We have great stories to tell, and then we can continue this conversation about SPACs, VCs, and whatsoever.
Sure.
But in closing, I have two questions for you. My first question is, any recommendations that have inspired you recently?
Oh wow, that's a tough one because I'm way behind my reading. But I've watched a lot of Netflix shows. So recently, what I really enjoyed was there was this Korean variety show on Netflix called The Hungry and the Hairy, Hairy. It was just basically two celebrities, and one of them is probably more well known than the other one. It's this singer slash dancer slash actor called Rain. I'm sure you know him, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was he and this other famous variety show host. They just go on road trips across South Korea, and it's not just any other road trips, right? Both of them ride super bikes. They just rode around South Korea, and they look for food. They have a good time with some friends, local friends and stuff like that. So to me it was quite relaxing and therapeutic because you get to see different parts of South Korea, and you get to see them, how these two actually who are friends in real life interacting with each other. That was something that I didn't think that I would enjoy it that much, but I did.
And Rain is actually featured before in the Stephen Colbert show as one of the biggest dance-off at one point in time.
Yeah.
And I think it also is reminiscent of that show from Ewan McGregor in Apple TV Plus, where they go from the North to South America and then across the Silk Road as well.
Yeah.
With a bike trip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, final question. How can my audience find you?
Well, I spend a lot of time on Twitter, so you can definitely find me there, which is at Ka Kay, Kayy. So I'm also on LinkedIn. Just key in my name, right, Lum Ka Kay, and you'll find me. And obviously, do subscribe to the Can as well. We have team of styler reporters from Southeast Asia and India, bringing you in-depth, original, analytical reporting from these two continents. So yeah, and if any of you guys would like to get in touch with any of us in the team, just give us a shout.
And you can definitely find this podcast on any podcasting platform from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, for Apple Podcasts to help us to discover better, give us a 5-star rating and also drop us a review. Ka Kay, many thanks on coming for the show, and I look forward to speak to you soon.
Likewise, thank you, Bernard.
Run it.